Are you looking for a fiery traditional fish boil?
The Old Post Office restaurant in Door County delivers. From the late spring into early autumn, visitors can get a special meal in Ephraim, Wisconsin at the Old Post Office restaurant.
Thank you guys all for joining us for one of Door County's oldest traditions, a historic Door County fish boil. I am the boil master here at the Old Post Office. I do every single fish boil here at the restaurant, which comes down to roughly 400 of these every season. And I was also born and raised right here in beautiful Door County. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about our famous fish boils that we do up here, starting with the fish we use. So what I have right over here, I do walk around the whole circle to show you what they look like before I put them in the kettle. So if you want to get a picture of the fish, have your phone out and ready, because I gotta kind of keep moving. Everything is done on this little timer here. So fish that we use for our fish boils here in Door County, they're fresh. They're all locally caught Lake Michigan whitefish. They're caught from both sides of the peninsula, both lakeside and bayside, depending on the time of year. We do buy all of our fish from local fishermen right here in Door County. We get fresh fish delivered just about every other day. They caught all of your fish yesterday morning. They go lift their nets for them usually every other morning, so that means you almost always get them cooked 1 or 2 days after they're caught here at the restaurant. If you've never been to a fish boil before, these are whitefish steaks. They're not whitefish fillets like you get at normal restaurants. They're basically chunks of whitefish. I take the whole entire fish and I cut them all up like this into steaks. That's what I was just doing in the kitchen a minute ago, cutting up all the fish. That does mean that all of the bones are still in the fish, which does kind of throw a lot of people off. However, the servers quickly remove the bones for you here at the restaurant right before they serve it to you. So believe me, it does make for a much nicer experience not having to deal with all those little fish bones. And we're the only fish boil restaurant up here in Door County where the servers take out the bones for you too, so very nice thing. Yes, it is. Also too, everybody gets 2 of these fish, our steaks, and this is only half of the fish for you guys. There's 109 people at this fish boil. Well, guess what? You can't put them all in the kettle at once for this many people. So what I do is I come out and I'll cook the other half as soon as you guys all start to head inside. Plus, while they're serving this one, there is a fresh one out back here cooking. So it also just assures by the time the servers get around to all of your tables, you're all getting some fresh, hot cooked fish. So you can do all the potatoes and onions in here at once. And then the fish, you're better off doing in batches like this. And this is part of 3,000 pounds they caught yesterday too, so that's a darn good day out on the water for the fellas. All right, these will go in the kettle for 7.5 minutes, which should be right about now. My timing is on. First thing first, there. It's on. Peaceful of smoke too. And it is 7:07, close enough. All right, now if you've never been to a fish boil before, well, obviously it is quite a dining experience to say the least. Door County is definitely home to the fish boils. We've been doing traditional fish boils here at the Old Post Office restaurant since 1978 now, so 45 years. I've been doing them here for the last 8 years, and we do the fish boils in every single type of weather condition, no matter what. So yes, rain or shine, we still do the fish boils, even if it's pouring down rain out back here. So that's always the most commonly asked question I get, and we don't close down for anything. So rain or shine. Now, before you guys all get here, I fill the kettle up with 25 gallons of water. 3 cups of salt go into the water. Salt is the only seasoning you put into a fish boil. It's pretty much all the Norwegian settlers had back in the old days. However, it does season everything quite well. The fish, the potatoes, and the onions. You get your fire burning. It takes about 20 minutes or so to get the water to really start to boil. Once the water's boiling, you start your timer at 30 minutes. Each fish boil takes a half an hour. Potatoes go in the kettle first for the whole half an hour. Onions will go in the kettle second, depending on the size of them. These are smaller ones. I put them in about 7 minutes after the potatoes went in, and then the fish will go in the kettle for the last 7.5 minutes or so. That's all it really takes to cook the whitefish. And last season, I cut up and boiled 35,000 pounds of them myself. So yes, we go through a ton of them up here just at this restaurant alone. However, we're always able to get fresh whitefish right out of our own local waters up here in Door County. So they're definitely an important natural resource to the area. Now the fish boil itself, This is an old Scandinavian tradition. It was started off by Swedish and Norwegian immigrants back in the 1800s up here in Door County. Northern Door County, where you guys are all at, is very rich in Scandinavian heritage. You do kind of see it all over up here. Well, the fish boils are a part of our old Scandinavian heritage as well. Most of the Swedes and Norwegians who settled here back in the 1800s, they were homesteaders up here in Door County. Basically got free land by the government just to move up to these remote areas so they could start establishing growth to the upper parts of the Great Lakes. Some of them came up here and fished. Most of them came up here and worked in the logging industry. Those would have been the two jobs back in the 1800s up here in Door County. There was plenty of fish out in the waters, and the peninsula itself was heavily forested. Now, I'm pretty sure that the fish boil was never really meant to become a tourist attraction like it is today. This would have been done in logging camps and fishing villages back in the 1800s up here. And most likely would have just been a practical and easy way to feed all those large groups of Scandinavian immigrants who were starting to settle up here on this remote peninsula. They had plenty of fish in the water. Well, they also had potatoes, onions, butter, and salt, 5 simple ingredients in a big kettle like this. They would do fish boils like this, and it would have just been used to feed the tiny little communities back in the 1800s, which were really nothing more than logging camps and tiny fishing villages at the time. So that's how this all started off. Wasn't until around the turn of the century, people started to appreciate all this natural beauty Door County had to offer. They quit logging all the forests. They started preserving areas for state parks, including Peninsula, which is straight across that harbor, and they started to build and open the first hotels and resorts for tourists, including the Edgewater Resort, opened up in the year 1900. It was one of the first hotels to open up here in the village of Ephraim. So right around that time, Door County started getting its very first tourists. Unlike today, where we get over 2 million visitors up here every summer, if you did come to Door County back in the early 1900s, you came up here by steamship. They didn't have the highways or roads built this far north on the peninsula until the late 1920s, so they started bringing tourists up here from Chicago and Milwaukee during the summertime by steamship. And if you were coming all the way up here from Chicago or Milwaukee on a steamship back in those early years, you probably weren't coming up here for a long weekend like most of you are doing right about now. This tourist ship only came into Ephraim once a week back in those days. Most of the guests who did come up here on it, they were quite well off, and they would spend a few weeks to a few months up here during the summertime. And back in those days, when you stayed at a hotel or resort for so long up here in Door County, well, they cooked all your meals for you while you stayed up here. And everybody pretty much ate the same thing. Well, some of those old resorts and hotels started doing fish boils for their guests, and that's how this tradition was born here in Door County. It's definitely a Door County original tradition, and you can date it all the way back to the very first European settlers we had up here in Door County. So it is a pretty neat thing. It's stuck around so long, and we still do it the traditional ways like this, using firewood. And very soon, a can of kerosene, which I have right over here. You know, the kerosene thing you do at the end of the fish boil, this is probably something that was discovered by accident if I had to take a guess. But the last thing you do on a fish boil, that is before you guys all go inside to eat it, is boil the kettle over. Once all this stuff cooks in here, you start to get this layer of foam and scum and even ash from the fire that simmers to the surface of the kettle. And somebody along the way came up with the boil over, where you throw a can of kerosene into the fire, makes a huge fireball, makes a great picture as well, so have your cameras ready for it. But more importantly, what it'll do, it'll make the whole kettle boil over. And yes, all that foam and gunk from the top will go right along with it. It does actually work. Quite genius. You'll see for yourselves in a moment. After the kettle boils over, you guys go right ahead, walk back in between the two buildings, and go right to your assigned tables. The servers come around and bring everybody a plate with a couple of whitefish steaks. You get boiled baby red potatoes. You also get a boiled onion. You put melted butter all over the top of that. You get homemade breads, homemade coleslaw, and for dessert, a slice of Door County cherry pie. Enjoy. Also, if you're new to Door County, grab one of my flyers I have over here on my rack. I was born and raised up here on the peninsula. I did print off a lot of the key places to visit for people that are new, so grab one of those if you would like. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. That worked. Thanks, everyone. You ready? That's right.
After the show, you can head to your table. Inside, the restaurant has a welcoming atmosphere. Our meal was delicious, and the cherry pie was spot on.
Today you can enjoy a beer or some wine with your dinner. Historically, Ephraim was a dry community due to the town's religious founding in 1853.
This structure's history begins in 1874 when it was built as a general store by a Norwegian immigrant named Peterson. He sold the property and business to his adopted son, James Hanson, in 1881 before returning home to Norway a few years later in 1883.
This site is the third location of Ephraim's post office, which was located in the corner of the store. The previous post offices were parts of the postmaster's homes. First Hans Jacobs, and later Andrew Hanson.
B.D. Thorpe became the next owner of the property in 1919 and renamed it the Glenmar. It housed a barber shop, beauty shop, and tea room.
Over the years, there has been a host of businesses who have called this building home, including a doctor's office. In 1943, Elmer and Josephine Lang purchased the property and opened Lang's Resort.
Current owner and chef Larry Krause began working at this location in the 70s and eventually acquired the business in 1999.
Today, you can still enjoy a meal here or stay in the lodging upstairs. Be sure to cross the street for the lake views or check out this great Door County destination.